Curious about AI? You're in the right place. Join me in today's episode where I talk to my good friend, Jeff Nelson, about how we use AI in our lives, in our business, and how you can too. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Let's go.
Hey everyone, I'm Debaun, a passionate entrepreneur and life advisor. With the Journey podcast, you'll discover that success isn't about the destination, it's about the journey. I'm sharing stories of amazing people who've taken control of their lives. Join me on my own journey to discover the secret sauce behind reaching success with permission from no one else. Welcome back to the Journey podcast. I am joined today by my good friend, your favorite techie, Jeff Nelson. Also happens to be my co-founder and COO of Blavity Inc. Jeff and I did an episode, I don't know, a couple months ago, and you all loved it. I think just because him and I were just literally just shooting at the hip. But today we're going to talk all about AI. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. It's an honor, twice in one season. Hey, I think I'm doing all right for myself there.
I think you're doing okay. All right. So I want to talk about artificial intelligence. And the reason why is because artificial intelligence, AI, has been accelerating at like just such an insane pace that I feel like the average person can't keep up with all the new tools and things that are coming out. Like even myself, like sometimes I'm like, wait, why did I just do that? Like I should have just put this in ChatGPT. So for example, I was just this morning, we had a meeting. We just launched the Afrotech Advisory Council, which is some of our top clients for us to talk about equity, inclusion, belonging in the tech workforce, and also just to share notes in kind of a private forum. And we had typed up all these incredible notes, very detailed. And so we were writing a summary email that was like, here's the notes. We wanted to desensitize them a little bit so that people didn't know which company was saying what. And like we manually summarized the notes. And I was like, why the hell did I do this? Why didn't we take out some things that were sensitive and just pop this in ChatGPT to summarize? So then I did that. Right. And of course it came back like 10 times better.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we just kind of zoom out. When ChatGPT first launched in 2022, which was like 2 years ago, hard to believe, right? If you compare where ChatGPT is today in 2024 compared to what it was in 2022, it's like, whoa, that shit sucked. But at the time, it was like, oh my God. And when ChatGPT launched, it kind of came out of nowhere. Unless you were like really in the trenches of what OpenAI was building, you didn't know. Suddenly in 2022, they were like, hey, we got this chatbot that can do everything. Yeah. And then 2023, it got better. 2024, it got better. And now, and I'm going to explain some of these terms later, but there are conversations about, do we reach this thing called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, which is basically AI that can truly, truly do anything without it having to be sort of specialized for one particular use case. Is that coming in 2025? Or Elon Musk is like, by 2029, AI is going to be smarter than us and it's going to overtake humans. Sort of like all the doomsday stuff is potentially on the horizon if you believe some of that stuff, right? And so it's amazing.
Do you believe it?
Yes and no. And I'll kind of get into it. My general stance on AI is that being in the space, I think that there's a lot of potential and a lot of power, but there's a lot of hype from people who may look at these things, and some of it is the marketing, right? And we know this as entrepreneurs and business owners. The story that you market is the most sensationalized, idealized version of what the reality is, right? And the reality behind the scenes, you mentioned the example of like with ChatGPT, how you use it to summarize the meeting notes. My experience working with like ChatGPT, and I've been working with Gemini, I actually noticed like I have to check my Apple Watch because my heart rate goes up. I actually get stressed out using it because it doesn't do exactly what I want. And I get so frustrated. And you should see some of the responses I get to it. Like, I know it's not a human. So I'm like, what the F are you doing? And I said this and you ignored this. And I'm just like berating it. And you know me, I never work with humans that way. That's not my style at all. But again, the marketing is like, AI can do it all. And it's a computer. It should be able to do it. And so when it gets it wrong, I get so frustrated. Yeah. And so all that to just say is like, yes, these tools are out there. People are discovering them. They are not yet at the point where I think it's second nature for people to use them. So sometimes we forget. But there's a lot of power and promise. But there's also, some limitations and frustration.
I thought I was the only one who yelled at my chatbot. Yeah. I'll definitely be like, that's not what I said, comma. Yeah. Please do it again.
And then it'll gaslight you, right? And I'm just like, you're like the best form of a human and the worst form of a human all in one. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So I've actually never used Gemini, partially because I don't even know how to get to it. What is Gemini? Yeah.
So Gemini is formerly known as Bard. This is Google's version of ChatGPT. Now, you cannot use Gemini on a sort of Google business account. I don't know what they call it now, Google Workspace, or if you're using it through like your company or your startup, unless you enable it for system wide, you can't use it. But on your personal Gmail, you can turn it on. Now, there are some
Mm,
caveats. With Gemini, Google is really good about telling you this, that sometimes there is human review of your responses or of the
mm,
of what you put in the responses. So, the caveat is always don't give it sensitive information. But with Gemini, it's like really like, no, Google is actually like, oh, okay. And the thing that I've noticed, because before I really got into it, I would notice there would be stuff that I was doing that was really kind of that I only knew about, like new stuff I was creating, and I would, put some stuff in the chat. And then 2 days later, Gemini is giving me responses like it literally was in my mind. And there's stuff that's not on the internet that it didn't scrape. It's like reciting that stuff verbatim, which is kind of what you
mm.
want AI to do. But it was just weird because I was like, no, like this is more than just AI doing its thing. It's like the stuff that I'm feeding into it. Oh no, this is now in their data set. And if it's
Yeah, and
regurgitating it back to me like this, everybody else has
that's
access to it as well.
interesting because I believe ChatGPT at one point, this might have changed already, but at
Mhm.
one point it was like, we can only parse data back to 2021 or
23, yeah.
2020. Now
Mhm.
seems like the LLMs are getting closer to real time. No, we can parse
Yeah.
stuff you this last week.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and also, like, with Gemini and Google, it's like, look, we have literally the entire search database of the web at our fingertips. Now, comparing the 2 tools, what I will say is that what I've noticed in my personal experience is that so ChatGPT, and I don't know if this is just a reflection of me, but it's so verbose. It's like, it's just
Yeah.
so long-winded, and it explains everything, and I'm just like,
Yes.
"I'm looking for one answer, just give it to me," and it's so
Yeah.
blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
Gemini is like its responses are just a lot more readable, relatable, more concise, more direct. It sounds less professorial and more like just a smart human being that is just kind of giving you stuff in layman's terms. I will say that I think that Gemini is probably better for generating content like copy, whereas
Mm.
ChatGPT is a lot better for generating code and more technical things.
Mm.
That's sort of been my experience with it so far, but the tools are out there, and I encourage people to use both. I mean, if you've got a Google account, a personal one, turn on Gemini, try it out. Obviously, with the caveat, don't feed it the secret sauce to your startup or your algorithm that you're building, because Google's gonna have that shit, right? But yeah, try them both out for sure.
And you don't use Anthropic and Claude? Because I use that, like,
I,
actually more than ChatGPT now.
no, I don't. I don't. I tend to use the general purpose tools, but I'm curious, like, why? Yeah, what's been your decision making criteria for the ones you use?
I find Claude and, Anthropic to be better at writing. So,
Mm,
as CEO, you guys, I'm the queen of the memo. So
right,
I send
right.
y'all a memo probably once every 2, 3 weeks, like, here's an update
Yeah.
and here's a memo to explain why, especially in a remote environment. And Claude, I found to be more effective at writing and nailing the voice. So when
Okay.
I was working on finishing up my book, I was like, okay, here's the story that I'm telling. Here's all the inputs. Like, Jeff and I started Blavity. We started doing this and da 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 da. Da. And then I would say, like, and here's the tone that I want. Here's copy from other like newsletters that I've written. And here's so
Mm,
my voice. And then I'm like, okay, now update this, revise this to be more clear. I find that it's better at training. Like I can train it on this is my voice. Here's some data inputs. Go. One of the things I played around with Claude is I'll say, write this in the voice of Gary Vaynerchuk. Write this in the
mhm,
voice of Levy. Write this in the voice of insert, Mark Manson, some of these public figures. And then I'll say, all right, cool. They'll send it back to me. And then one of the things that I'll trick it and I say, well, how did you develop this voice? And
mhm.
then they'll say, well, no, it'll try to like dodge the question. It'll be like, well, we get all data
Right.
from,
Where are your sources? Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, no, but more specifically, and I keep pushing it. I keep pushing it. And what I found out is that it's taking interviews that these public figures are doing with
Mhm,
Forbes or whomever, and then it's taking the responses and defining that as the tone for
mhm.
that author, that writer, that public figure. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. So then, me,
Yeah.
I'm like, right at the voice of Morgan Debaun.
Yeah.
It was
And
really
then right.
interesting.
Yeah.
I was like,
That's so interesting. That it's so a couple of things out of that that I would love for us to dive into because you just sparked a couple of things. One thing that I eventually want us to get to is like, where do these bots get data? How are they trained? How does that work? But one thing you hit on, which is just this idea of using AI to sound like someone else or
Mhm.
to simulate responses like someone else. I mean, I think that's very topical now in the world with just like rap beefs that are going on. There was this, Drake is beefing with the entire
Oh, trust
industry. And, we're talking about like ChatGPT and using it for business things, but now, people are actually using AI to create
voice.
songs that has the
Mm.
artist's voice and you can't tell if it's real or not. So when Drake's diss to like Kendrick Lamar and Rick Ross and all these people came out, people were like, is this AI? Is this real? And it turns out it was real. A couple days later, a Kendrick Lamar verse drops and people are like, oh my God, this is the thing, or is it AI? Turns out it was AI. The person who did it, he
Oh, wait,
showed
was
like
it?
how it was AI. Yeah. And again, so this is like
Oh my
an
god, I didn't know
example.
that.
It was AI, and we're in an election year. I mean, I think everything always comes back to like those sorts of implications, but we're seeing real time examples of where you can not only use AI to create, but you can
Mm,
use AI to essentially fool the world, right? And yes, in a rap beef, presumably that's trivial. Hopefully nothing spirals out of control. But we think about a world now where there's an election coming up and it could be used for things like that, or even take it outside of electoral consequences. Even if you use AI to generate something like the CEO of a company saying something outrageous that drives the stock price down or market
right.
manipulation. I mean, the potential ramifications of it are insane. Right. So that's one thing. Another thing that you talked about, which is like how you're figuring out where these tools are getting their data from. Gemini is a lot better about, is a lot more strict about being like, and it's funny if you ask, it's like, okay, where'd you get this from? They're like, I mean, like, here's some things you can Google to maybe find it, but we're not telling you more than that. One of the things that does frustrate me about using AI in these tools is that they themselves are not always accurate. And I'll talk about why that's the case. And
Mhm,
so there is this added level of stress of like, certainly if you're summarizing meeting notes, that's one thing. But if you're like, hey, write this chapter of my book for me, or write this thing, or write this legal brief, you have to fact check it.
yes.
And it's frustrating because oftentimes you're like, well, where did you get this information? Where did you get this source? And then ChatGPT is like, oh my bad, I actually did make that up. Sorry about that. Here's a,
Yeah,
and it's
literally,
just like
it'll say that.
it, it was just like I made that up, my bad. And so, in some ways, AI does make you faster and more productive. But in
Yeah.
some cases, it has slowed me down because I'm so paranoid and nervous about, okay, is this accurate? Now I have to research what you did, and then it's not accurate. And so I wasted all that time. Now I got to come back to, and so you get in this loop of, okay, how do I use AI to be effective and actually make myself more productive, but
Mhm,
use it in a way that's responsible, not just like take what it gives me and put it out
mhm.
there and end up looking foolish. So that's
Yeah, and
that's
I
the
think that's
challenge.
that's definitely a tip for anybody who's using ChatGPT or any of these tools. It's like,
Mhm,
use it as, not to replace yourself, but to just speed yourself up. And I find actually ChatGPT has a platform now where people can build apps on top of it,
mhm,
which you could always do, but now we can use the apps that other people are building. And
mhm,
so there's certain apps that have their own data sets, like
mhm,
LexisNexis, right? Or if you're in the medical field, looking at a lot of research papers and scientific peer studies, right? So that I feel like is a really efficient way where previously you would have to go into, the LexisNexis search bar and look through all
mhm.
this stuff. Now it'll do it for you and you can trust that it's just parsing the data set that was given to you by that app. That I think is actually really incredible. It's kind of like when you went to the library back in the day and you had like the card catalogs, you
Yeah.
had to like
What was it? The,
go
the
through
Dewey
that.
the Dewey Decimal System or something like
That's
that?
remember we had to like spend time learning that stuff. And then
Yeah.
now it's like I could just go to the library and just get the
Mhm.
book. Now it's even further. You don't even have to go to the library. You can have a
You
digital
don't.
library card and you can have like the book on
Mhm.
your phone or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's incredible how certain things are just getting completely replaced. What other things do
Mhm.
you think will get completely replaced soon?
I think AI is going to disrupt so many things. Before I answer that directly, I think it's important for people to understand when we talk about AI, we're specifically talking right now about Gen AI or generative AI
Mhm.
that can generate new things. And the analogy that I've seen that I think is really, really effective, it's like the most intelligent autocomplete. You do that game where you get your phone, if you have an iPhone or even an Android, how sometimes they'll suggest the next word. And so you just sort of like keep tapping the whatever suggestion comes and you see what sentence it forms, right? Well, AI is like that supercharged, right? So when we talk about, well, AI makes things up, it isn't so much that it's making things up or not. It's literally the way AI works is it says, I have a data set of literally all information on Earth, and you're
Mhm.
giving me this prompt, right? Based on all this data I have and all this compute power that I have, how can I very quickly, based on the total conversation we've been having today, what is the most
Mhm.
likely best next word? And it just keeps doing that over and over again. And then it's parameterized by all these different things like, well, what's the maximum length it should be? And
Yeah.
how random should I be? And should I try to include diversity in my response in terms of like variation in the word choice? It's parameterized by all those different factors. The reason why Gen AI is so revolutionary is because prior to Gen AI really being released into the wild, what AI really was somewhat domain specific. And so
Mm.
if you think about self-driving
Mhm.
cars use a form of AI, but they're not generating anything new per se. What they're doing is saying, I've been trained on a bunch of driving data. So putting myself in situations that look similar to my training, I can predict what I should do next, or I can
Hmm.
predict how to navigate roads. And oh, this looks like a human. And when we see humans, we should stop. So I stopped. The precursor to that sort of intelligence, which is just building a program, right? When you say, if you see this, do that. If you see this other thing, do that. And so you can sort of see the evolution from a program, which is explicit sets of rules, but those rules only do what you tell it to do. If you haven't told it to do something, or if you haven't told it how to encounter something, it's somewhat undefined what happens.
Mhm.
Then, sort of machine learning AI that comes after that is more intelligent, but it's domain specific. Gen AI is another evolution where it's like, hey, we can create net new things because we're amassing all this knowledge and we're sort of saying, well, what's the most likely thing that should come
Mhm.
next in a general context, right? And so there's a lot of promise and potential in that to disrupt things. And I think the most obvious area where that's going to happen is going to be in creative endeavors. I think that, we mentioned the example of like Drake and Kendrick Lamar. I think for music and even like movies and stuff, AI is going to be generating scripts. AI is going to be generating reference tracks. Instead of using like CGI or doing expensive graphics or even
Mhm.
going on location to do stuff, like AI is going to be generating a lot of that stuff. So I think that big disruption is going to be in the creative space where it's less about is this accurate and it's more about is this good? Is this compelling?
Mhm.
Does it look good? Does it sound good? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wonder, in the tech industry, particularly with our work in Afrotech, we spend a lot of money recruiting engineers to come to the
Mhm.
experience, to be a part of the Afrotech community, to go into engineering and different things like cybersecurity. And our clients pay a lot of money to recruit engineers. I mean, a average tech company could spend upwards of 100K plus to bring a new engineer into their company.
Mhm.
Do you see the value of engineers decreasing with
No,
AI?
no, not at all. And I am even more convinced of that after having tried to use AI to generate code. And I realized that, was the technical co-founder of Blavity, right? I've founded tech companies. Obviously, I'm a more advanced engineer than most people. So the way that I'm judging it is sort of on a higher scale. But when I've tried to use AI to generate code, what I've noticed is that it does not generate solutions that are robust or solutions that are well thought out. It
Mhm.
doesn't generate solutions that are even all the time correct, right? And when you're writing code, that's where you actually need things to be correct and somewhat robust. So no, I don't see engineers becoming less necessary over time. Even as AI advances, I don't see that. I think what ends up happening is that the junior engineer, sort of like the apprentice, there used to be a path in engineering, which I do think is going away, which is you used to be able to do a coding boot camp for 3 months, get a certificate, get an entry level job as a junior engineer or an apprentice, making almost six figures between the 80 and 100K, right? That
Mhm.
was a legit path
Mhm.
for a lot of people. That sort of stuff is going away because, yes, the type of stuff that a junior or an apprentice engineer, which is like, hey, just quickly, take this wireframe and generate a landing page that looks like it. Yes, AI can do that stuff fine because there isn't a lot of
Mm,
novelty or net new kind of engineering that goes into that. It's really
static.
just matching patterns. Exactly.
Mhm,
That type of stuff is automatable. And I do think that unfortunately that path has gone away. But there does come a point in engineering, and we run into this at Blavity all the time when we build something quick because we want to ship it, and then it's like, okay, well, now to go to the next level, we've either got to re-architect it or rebuild it, or we need more talented engineers. There does come a point where it's less about can you generate the code, and it's more can you
mm,
think in novel ways and look at nuances and come up with new things. And that's what
mhm,
AI is not really good at yet. So I don't see engineers being obsolete. I think they're needed now more than ever because you're going to have a lot of companies that use AI to generate stuff that they don't know how to maintain. They're going to
mhm.
use AI to create this thing, and then they're going to be like, okay, great. Now we wanted to do this. We don't know where to start. Or we went back to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is gaslighting us. It's saying, some other stuff. So I do think engineers are going to be so important in continuing to build, but they need to know how to use AI as a tool to help them and also
Yeah.
use AI as a tool to allow them to do more interesting things.
If you had to build a business and make like $1 million with that business using AI that other people would pay for, what would you
Mhm.
build?
Mm. I actually had this idea with Blavity. We have so many media properties, right? We have content for travel. We have content for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the tech industry, right? We have content for women's health, beauty, empowerment. I mean, entertainment. So many different things. I am very interested of being in this space of creating content that is relatable. My
Mhm.
nickname is the relatable CTO. So relatable content that demystifies all these technical things and makes it very simple, right? So whether it's for like tech stuff or even whether it's for fitness, I think, my fitness journey, there are a lot of things that people struggle over that if you actually just sort of understand the basics of weight gain and weight loss, it's a math problem. It's counting calories and how do you understand macros and all this stuff. Stuff is actually really, really simple if you break it down. I actually went through and bought like every conceivable domain you can think of with the word relatable. So relatable fitness, relatable weddings, relatable dating, relatable sex, relatable tech, relatable everything. And I was like, I'm just going to use AI to generate a bunch of SEO optimized articles
Let's
that have
go.
product recs, put affiliate links on it, it's AI generated content, SEO optimized, has affiliate links, you run some programmatic ads, and you just spin up all these domains and just boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
turn the engine on. It's a content generating engine. That was an idea I had. And then as we saw, it's like, well, commerce and affiliates, that kind of, started trending downward. SEO changes started to happen. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe not this one. But I do think that is a space. I think any business where the value of what you do is in creating information and content to bring people in is going to
Yeah.
be a valuable use of AI. And then you could potentially upsell them to other things that, maybe have a different margin. They may be lower margin, but you actually get a benefit from the volume that you could potentially bring in by that lower funnel stuff that
Mm.
AI allows you to do. So that was my approach. If you see relatable anything.com, it's probably me that idea is probably going to launch at some point, but keeping
Jeff,
that in the
Jeff,
bag.
10 years into business, I can confidently say we are not going to use the domains that we both hoard. So look, I mean, I have
Yes,
probably 200 at this point.
we we are both. You are worse than me. I get it from you. You are the worst domain hoarder I have ever seen in my life, but you get some really really good ones.
Oh,
You
they're
get some really
so
really good ones.
good. They're
So
so
good, and
good.
yeah, it's like you sit on it for 10 years, and it's like oh
I
well,
still
gotta let
own
it go.
shmoney.com.
I think you should pass that down to your son. I think that's one that you just gotta you gotta pass it down generations through and through.
I've got so many good ones like booksforblackboys.com,
Yeah.
like all types of random stuff.
I
If
am
I were
I am curious what you would say. What business would you build with AI
ooh,
if it could
I
be anything?
would okay, if I had to build a business with AI, make a milli, yeah, I think it would probably have to do with, making recommendations to people. Like,
Mhm.
people are willing to spend a lot of money for recommendations, you
Yeah,
know?
for
And to
sure.
your point, I don't know if I would go the model of, like, trying to monetize it through ads, but I would probably say, like, for example, contracts, like small business contracts. I was just talking about this the other day. So my partner Josh, as you know, has a small business as well. He's also an entrepreneur, and he needs someone to help him write contracts. And I was like, well, I can send you my contract lawyer, but she's super expensive. They're over $300 an hour. But I'm like, but your
Mhm.
contracts really aren't that complicated. You just need somebody to do it, and you're not a legal person. So what would it look like to just have like pay a bunch of paralegals and have a bunch of contracts that are basically templated just for small businesses? Because again, you don't want enterprise level contracts and stuff because those are really complicated and the risk is
Yeah.
higher. But just small business contracts where you're just paying for, a
Yeah.
vendor
Real
or
simple. Hmm.
employment agreement or contractor agreement, like super simple stuff. You do it by state. You say, we'll start off in California, Texas, Tennessee. I wouldn't do New York because they have a ton of weird stuff going on there. I don't know, Illinois, right? And then I would build that. Like,
Hmm.
and it would basically be legal Zoom, but not legal Zoom because legal Zoom sucks. So, I mean, it's
Yeah.
dollar business, so it doesn't suck that bad. But I think it sucks partially because there's no other competitors to it for real. That's what I would do. It'd be a B2B service that is taking something that everybody needs, but no one's an expert in because we're entrepreneurs. And then adding some human element, paralegals just to check it, which would happen really quickly. And I think people would be willing to spend like $100 to $200 a month just to have a in-house AI counsel.
Yeah.
I should check that domain name before we release this episode.
You should. You should. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Get Kate's on it right now. She's checking
What
for
we
it.
doing?
But
Help me out, girl. Case my
that
chief of staff out.
I think what you're hitting on is that for most people, building with AI it's not necessarily about building an intelligent product. It's about
No.
building AI to streamline your operation. So there's this thing now where a lot of baby boomers are retiring and they have
Yeah.
businesses and they're looking to sell those businesses, right? I have a friend who lives in New York. His family is rich in New York. I think if you're rich in New York or California, you're like really, really rich, right?
Yeah.
And their family businesses, they sell like air conditioning units, super unsexy. I mean, when you think about being an entrepreneur, like, oh, I want to change the world. I'm going to sell air conditioners, right?
Right.
But obviously, it's a need, and they've done very, very well for themselves. There are tons of businesses like that where the owners, one, are looking to sell, but the way they ran the business is not super efficient because it is so manual, it's so labor intensive, they have so much overhead. So there's a huge
Mhm.
opportunity, and not only getting these businesses that they want to sell, but then completely revolutionizing the operational infrastructure using AI, automating daily operations, using it to think about marketing in new ways to attract new customers. So that's
Right.
like, if I had to build a business with AI, like the stuff you're saying, and that approach is what I would
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. At one point, I thought about building, if I had time, which I don't,
do. Mhm.
but if I did,
Yeah.
if I had time, one of the ways I would get richer and more wealthy would absolutely be to build a private equity fund that buys
Mm.
businesses from boomers
Mhm.
whose kids don't want to run their business because they're off
Mhm.
living their lives and they want to liquidate the business and say, all right, cool. Let's say they're doing like 3 to 5 million in profit. Maybe that means their business is doing, 5 to 10 million in revenue, and saying, all right, cool. I'm going to buy this business, pay you out some sort of earnout. And then you just go buy a couple of those in the same category. So like
Mhm.
not laundromats per se, but to your point, like services. So people who do like commercial landscaping, right?
Mhm.
Like so boring, but those contracts, like nobody's ever trying to replace their commercial landscaper.
Exactly. Exactly.
Whoever does it, right?
Mhm.
Or pest control, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't know who owns the pest control company that we use for
Right.
our house, but I'm sure he's balling or she. I'm sure
Exactly.
she's balling,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
So things like that that are recurring businesses that you do every year. People who do like lights, the lights for the holidays, Christmas lights, right?
Mhm.
Man, I got the quote to do Christmas lights,
It's
thousands of
insane.
dollars.
Insane. Oh, my lights would be staying up all year round. I'd be that obnoxious house 365. Those lights are
You
coming
know what I'm
on.
saying? Them lights stand up. Okay.
Yes,
What are we
for
talking
sure.
about? Right?
Yeah,
So
for
who
sure.
does the commercial lights?
Mhm.
They're raking in them, right?
Oh, for
So
sure.
I would buy a business like that or build a private equity fund that buys up a bunch of businesses like that, most likely B2B services. And then I never thought about the fact that you could use AI basically to squeeze out more profit because you're going to automate
Hmm.
some things that were potentially manual. So if they were doing
Yeah.
3 to 5 in profit, maybe they could be doing 4.5 to 6, 7.
Hmm.
I think that's really smart. Someone should do that.
Yeah. Someone with time,
Yeah, so with
because
time.
we
If
don't have it.
anybody wants to finance my private equity fund to buy B2B businesses or just to buy small businesses in general, please hit me up.
This will be the launch of the fund right now.
I could probably get it
Yeah.
done. I just have to hire a couple of
Yeah.
MBAs, buy out some ex-McKinsey people. As far as I know, all the consultants are going down anyways, so we'll
Yeah.
see.
I wonder if AI will replace consultants. I don't
I
think the
think so.
engineers are in danger, but consultants might be. Yeah.
I think the consultants definitely, because they were parsing a ton of data and making
Hmm.
recommendations. Basically, they were an army of people that could parse information and make smart decisions. I do
Yeah.
think that consultants are probably going to be a decreasing
Yeah.
commodity.
In a lot of ways, we have a lot of friends who are consultants. Shout out to the
Yeah.
consultants, no shade or anything. But, a lot of the work in consulting is not necessarily creating anything new. You are basically someone that has a lot of general knowledge and has seen a lot of things. And you can look at something and be like, here is a pattern that
Yeah.
you should do, right? Which is really what AI does. And so, yeah,
Yeah. And a bit of
that's it.
placebo. Like to some extent, people
Mhm.
hire consultants because they don't want to be the one that makes the recommendation. So, like, if
Correct.
you're doing a reduction in force and you've got to make tough decisions about which org goes and how you're going to structure that, then you might hire a consultant because you're just like, well, they did the study
Right.
and like this is the
You can,
outcome.
yeah, you can blame someone else. Yeah,
You
you can
blame
blame
the
someone else for it. Mhm.
yeah. So again, no shade to our management consultant friends out here in these streets.
Yes.
You guys are
We
very
love
smart.
y'all.
We love y'all. All right, moving on to another topic. So, a lot of people listening to this are probably also building side hustles. They've
Mhm.
got their main hustle, their 9 to 5. I did an episode the other day on like how to quit your job if you wanted to quit your job, just move your side hustle to your main hustle. If you were side hustling back in our side hustle days when we were starting
Mhm.
Blavity, what are the tasks or things that you would use AI to automate that we previously did manually?
So I'm glad you asked this question because I'm probably going to surprise you. Depending on when this episode drops, this may be a scoop. I may be breaking some news, or well, we'll see what the timing wise is. But I was inspired by you, and I actually decided to write a book. And yes, I am in the final stages of editing it. Now, it's not anything. It's so I don't like reading. So me writing a book is somewhat ironic. It's a very short book. It's 80 pages, maybe 90. It's a tiny book,
That is so on
but
brand for you.
it is so on brand. But it's called Hacking the Startup Paradox. And what it is
Mhm,
essentially kind of an answer to that question of you have no resources, or you have very minimal resources. How do you actually start a company? And in the book, what I'm doing is really just giving 20 like specific tips, like do this, go to this tool, do this, go to this tool. So it's very, very in the weeds, practical, tangible stuff, right? In that book, I do talk about how to use AI for your side hustle. You're working a job, you don't have any time, you don't have any money, but you got this idea. How do you use it? There are some very key and practical ways that I would tell somebody to infuse AI into their side hustle, right? So I'm going to break this down in two ways. One is if your side hustle is something technical, right? If you're
mhm,
trying to build, a technical business, right? One, we talked about using AI for coding and some of the limitations. I do
mhm.
think that there is the ability to use AI to build an MVP or a prototype. So I wouldn't use it to build like a full-fledged app that you're really trying to get out in production. But if you're like, look, I have a lot of friends who are like, if I could just get some traction, if I could just get some users, I can go to an investor and I can raise some money, right? You and
Mhm.
I both know it's hard. Even all that said, it's hard, but sure, you want to go down that path. But it's like, I can't afford an engineer. I don't know how to build it myself. And they spend years trying to build this prototype, right? There are tools, there are no code platforms that literally, if you have a spreadsheet with data,
Mhm.
you can literally just upload a spreadsheet and it will create an app interface where it's leveraging not only the data in the spreadsheet, but the formulas and calculations to build an app, right? So if you're somebody that's like, look, I can put together a spreadsheet, you can turn that into an app idea. They have these other platforms that are called code remixing platforms. So you can actually take code snippets that other people have written, literally drag and drop them together. And this isn't just the interface. This is actually like back end functionality. It's like, oh, I want them to be able to log in with Google. I'm just going to drag this code snippet. Oh, I want them to be able to do this thing. I'm going to drag this code snippet and you remix other people's code snippets and you build an app, right? There are platforms that do stuff like that. So I would absolutely if you have a side hustle and you like, I've got this app idea, before you spend any real money, before you quit your job pursuing it, use AI to build a quick prototype. I mean, you can in Figma, you can draw out, back in our days when we would draw out a wireframe, we would then, Morgan would do this, she would draw out the wireframe. Then we would create actual wireframes and prototypes on the computer. This is before Figma was really a thing. This is before Adobe XD. We'd hire a
Yeah.
designer to then create a lo-fi version of it. We'd give them feedback. Then we'd hire a designer to do it. Now with Figma XD, you can literally just do the whole process with AI, right? Draw
Wild.
something out, say, create wireframes, cool. Create the interface, cool. Generate the code for it. So to build an MVP, I would actually do that. That's one thing. The other thing that we used to do that I think is beneficial, even if your side hustle isn't building an app, you mentioned this. We used to spend a lot of time organizing data, organizing information, analyzing data. We used to do it a lot at first, then we'd hire virtual assistants to do it. AI can be really, really good about doing a lot of that stuff, right? I think the biggest thing for AI is freeing you up to use whatever amount of time you have for your side hustle or your startup or whatever it is. Whatever amount of time you have, if AI can free you up to think, to do things that are interesting, and to care for yourself, that is a good use of AI. Best use of AI, in my opinion.
I love it. How can people get on your email list so they know when it's going to drop?
Yes. So you go to jeffnelson.com. This is about my book, Hacking the Startup Paradox. If you go to jeffnelson.com, you can sign up for my email list to be notified when it drops. And yeah, it's going to be cool. I hope people like it. And I will say, Morgan did this process the right way. Morgan has been thinking about her book for years. And I'm excited to read it because what I love about what you've done, and I haven't even seen the manuscript, but what I know based on your concept is that you're not only telling the story about our journey, really your journey, but the role that so many people have played in that journey, but you're also distilling that down to say, here's practical stuff that you can take away from it, right? So it's not just like, look at me, I made it, but it's like, hey, I went through this, I made it. Here's how you too can take what I've done and apply it to your journey and trying to make it. So you did that the right way. You've been working with an editor, you've been working really, really hard on it. I literally got this idea because I mentor founders and I'm like, I keep telling people about this startup paradox idea that I have. I should really just like create an ebook and charge people like, a little bit of money for it and get some incremental revenue from it. So it stems from that. I was like, I'm just going to put this together. Like I already have the information. I'm just going to like write it down. But as I got into it, I really took it seriously. It was like, I really want to be intentional about my voice, my tone, how I am communicating information in a way that is relatable, that is digestible, that comes off as authoritative, but also is not too, complex that people are just like, I don't even know where to begin. And so I'm really excited. It's one of those things where I have not worked with an editor. I have not worked with anybody on it. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm going to put it out there. If it sucks, I won't be too mad because I'm like, this is what I have to say. And if everybody is like, we don't care or this is terrible, then I'm like, okay, well, cool. I'll shut up. Right. Cool. But it's a
I have
message that I
a feeling
really,
it's
really want people to hear.
not good. I'm sure it's going to be
Yeah,
very.
I think it's good. I think it's good.
What is your website built on? I just looked it
Yeah,
up.
so that is actually the old version that you're seeing. So again, I don't know when this is going to drop, but it's a WordPress site that was made a couple years ago. There's a new design in the works that is going to be a lot better. That is going to talk about the book, going to talk about a lot of the other things that I do. So once the book is ready to roll out, it's going to be a nice little campaign to let people know, get some signups, and get people to go buy it and check it out.
Well, you've
I'm
got
excited.
one reader right here, and
I
I appreciate
appreciate that. Leave a review. Yes, because that's what
you.
matters, right?
Yeah, facts. You're going to put it up
Yeah.
on Amazon, or are you going to do it on
It's
your
gonna,
own?
I'm doing straight KDP, print on demand, ebook. It's simple as can be.
That's also kind of ambitious.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I started writing this a month ago, uh, and,
As somebody
like
who took
fortunately,
years to write a book, I'm like,
but
bro.
like what I said, it's such a short book, but it's been so stressful. I've been so moody because I'm like, and maybe you can relate to this. It's not even so much the mechanics of the writing; it's knowing what you want to say, but figuring out how to say it in a way that is compelling, in a way that actually has the full meaning of what you're trying to do, that fits into the structure that you're trying to build. It's like you can't just say it in the way you want to say it. You gotta make it make sense, and so that's really hard and stressful.
One of the things that I've did during my book writing process when I was like editing myself was I got to the point where I actually started to do dictation because I could say what I wanted to write better
Mhm.
than writing it out. So I would dictate it and just like on my iPhone. And then I would have it transcribe. And then from there, I would then pop that into AI and I would say, like, clarify this and write this as if you're talking to someone and teaching them
Mm.
how to get it done using
If
like
for
my language.
for your book, what would you say is the ratio of you telling a story versus you explaining?
Oh, absolutely. I start with a story every chapter.
Mhm,
So I start with a story, and then I would say within the first 2 pages, then it's like, "And therefore, I messed up, and
mhm,
here's the lesson," right? Or like, "And therefore, it worked, and here's
mhm,
why." And then it's method. So it's story, method, like, here's
mhm.
the framework, then here's the how, here's the application, and then it ends with either, "How do you know that you're doing this right?" Or, "Here's some things that people often get wrong, and here's how you address them." Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It does. When you're giving the method and the how, like, are you writing it in a way that is more detached and more objective, like boom, 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 it's this, or are you still kind of infusing, like your personal voice and self
It's still
into
my
it?
personal voice. It
Mhm.
is more instructional in nature as it gets further into the chapter, but it starts off really warm and fuzzy. So it starts off with
Right.
like, as I was sitting at my computer, with dirty
Yeah.
clothes all around me and mail unopened because I was raising
Yeah.
around everything and I literally couldn't do anything else because I was
Mhm.
so unproductive at work, but I really had to get the money and we were running out of money and da 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 da. Like I start with the story and then it goes more into like, and therefore, like the thing that I learned now is how to mindful productivity, where I stack my growth
Mhm.
hacks in the morning when I'm most productive. And and for me, that looks like this, but for
Mm.
you, it may look like this, 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 this. And so here's the method, like here's the framework, mindful productivity. This is the definition. Here's how you apply it. And then usually there's a couple other sections, and then it's like, this is why people oftentimes aren't successful at executing this. And I might
Mhm.
tell like a little bit of a story there or a story of like someone I advised or someone that I coached. So, yeah, I think the point in which I used AI was when I would say, like, this is how I did it. And then I would say, like, make this so someone else could understand it because sometimes it's hard
Right.
to explain clearly what I'm saying. And I would also say, like, explain it to like you're explaining it to a B school person. Explain it like you're explaining it to someone who's a mom of 3. Explain it to
Mhm.
somebody, and I would test it against different avatars that I was writing against so that I could see, okay, here's how the nuances, like things that I should consider. And I think that's the other tip with AI. And we spent a lot of time this episode talking about AI generating for writing and code, but like to your
Mhm.
point, there's audio, there's video, there's all different types. But part of how I talk to AI and how I use AI when I'm doing my prompts, it's typically a gut check or it's a tone check. Run this against this type of character or this assumption. Does it still
Mm.
fit or are there inconsistencies here? If this is the rule book that I'm giving people in my chapter, where would someone say, this doesn't apply to me? Because I was
Yeah.
also really sensitive to the fact that this book is a general market book. It's not just for entrepreneurs. It might be for someone who has a 9 to 5. It might be someone who decided to be a stay-at-home mom who's building on a side hustle. It's not just for venture-backed founders. So it needed to be
Right.
applicable to everybody. So I actually use it a lot just to gut check me on that.
It's fascinating, like, hearing about your process. So the book you're writing is so much harder than anything that I could ever imagine for many reasons. One, because your audience is so general, but the element of one, telling a story. I think storytelling in general is hard, especially to do it effectively. But to tell a story, to keep people engaged, but then also pivot that to advice, that is such a hard balancing act. And so, like, I am really impressed by how you like approach that and use AI. For me, it was relatively easy because I intentionally am not telling a story. Like,
I
the,
see.
the way that I intentionally wrote the book was with such a level of detachment, like personal detachment, and really just kind of like, it's really, I wouldn't even say it's teaching. I think it's really like introducing information and concepts, but leaving it there. And I was very intentional about doing it that way because I didn't want to tell my story or a story in general. And the type of learner that I am, I'm a skimmer, right? So I really wanted to sort of write a book for people like me who are like, just tell me the what it is and where I go to get it, and then I'm gonna go figure it out. I don't need to read like 5 pages about the ins and outs of it. It's like, you want to do this? Cool. This thing does this for you. This is where you go to get it. Boom. You want to do this? Boom, 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 boom. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes off. I tried to use AI a bit to generate, and it was really, really frustrating For me, the frustration is in my writing, what took the most amount of time was there's a certain rhythm that I needed to write with because I'm a skimmer. If I'm skimming and there aren't natural kind of breaks, like sort of either words or punctuation or things that signify kind of a break, then I get lost, right? If the sentence feels too long or feels too wordy, then I'm just like, I don't care. I don't want to read it. And so for me, it was really a challenging exercise in writing in a way that everything from the punctuation choice to the word choice to the length of the sentence to when I'm using compound sentences versus simple sentences, like there just has to be a certain flow. So when as you're kind of
Right.
skimming through it, you think you're skimming, but you're actually reading every word, but it just goes so quickly and so rhythmically that it just
Yeah.
flows. That was the most challenging part of it, and the part that I'm still trying to
Yeah. The
make sure that I got
cadence,
right.
the tone, and
Yeah.
pattern matching. I mean, I
Mhm.
think you probably could have, maybe if you use Claude, I actually think
Right,
you
which
probably
is like I'm actually probably gonna go check that out a little bit because I'm still editing, so I'm like,
I think they could do that. Like, I think you could
yeah.
upload a set of text and say, "This is the tone, the pattern, the cadence that I want to write in.
Mhm,
Please keep in mind the punctuation and the length of like the average sentence here."
mhm,
Like, you have to just tell it what to look at, in my opinion. But
yeah,
yeah, go do that. Let me know what you think. All right, I could just keep talking because you're my
yes,
friend. So we're gonna
yes,
wrap it
alright.
up. Rapid fire questions, Jeff. A few things. If you were going to invest in three stocks that are riding the wave of AI outside of NVIDIA,
Mm.
what would you invest in?
Everything I wanna invest in is, like, private. It's like, I wanna invest in OpenAI. Vista Equity, which is owned by Robert F. Smith, just announced a $20 billion fund specifically, their private equity, $20 billion fund specifically for AI-based companies and enabling
Crazy.
their companies to use AI. That's the kind of stuff I wanna be invested in. So, what I'll say is I won't pick individual stocks, but I can tell you what I think are going to be sort of adjacent things that enable AI. One is going to be energy, right? Energy companies, energy ETF, because when we talk about AI, it all comes down to compute. And compute right now is limited just by the consumption of energy. And so companies that are really kind of innovating in building alternative sources of energy are going to do well because AI is going to depend on those things. You mentioned, chips is another thing, right? Again, when we think about compute, it is, do you actually have chips that go in these servers and these machines that can actually perform these workloads, right? And so right now, NVIDIA is looking really good. Is looking really good, but any sort of semiconductor manufacturing is going to be really important. The U.S. a couple years ago passed the CHIPS Act, which was a bill that was designed to help with semiconductor manufacturing and building chips here in the U.S. Partially counter that happening over in China. So there was this element of competing against China with it. But, looking in sort of those kind of sectors, industrials and semiconductor manufacturing and manufacturing of chips is an area that I think is going to be important. And then I'm going to choose a sector that I think AI is really going to be monumental in. And I actually think that it is going to be something like healthcare. And not only when we think about AI, I think, right now people are like ChatGPT, but AI is so broad. There's so much in terms of robotics, right? And that robotics has been around for a very, very long time where, robots are actually performing surgery. But even beyond that, there's research now where AI is better at diagnosing certain diseases in patients than certain doctors are. Even beyond just kind of like the actual medicine part of healthcare, the actual just kind of staffing, right? I think nursing and just getting, medical workers, that's probably like one of the largest workforces in the world. And so AI is going to really assist with not only aiding that process, but also augmenting that process. So I'd be investing in all types of healthcare and medical stocks, medical devices, medical research, all that stuff.
Absolutely. I think healthcare for sure. I think financial services and banking, mortgage lending, anything where there's human element and a huge data set. I think
Yeah.
that efficiency and profits will go up for sure. What tools for people who are building products outside of Gemini, ChatGPT, and Anthropic Claude that we just talked about? Are there any other AI tools that you're using on a regular basis that people should check out?
Yeah, so check out Figma. Like if you're trying to build an interface, Figma has some really cool AI tools. Replit is an online sort of code generator and coding playground. if you're new to development or even if you're technical, use that. They've got some cool AI stuff where you can kind of describe the functionality you want and just do it. There are a lot of cool no code platforms. Bubble is one that I really, really like that you can use to build some apps on the fly. So there are tons of tools out there. Just search for no code platforms, AI interface builders, lots of stuff out there. Experiment.
Amazing. Jeff, thank you so much for joining the Journey podcast. Y'all, Jeff is going to continue to be a regular on the show. So make sure you are commenting, leaving us a review. Go ahead and send me or Jeff a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever you're watching this. Thank you so much. And make sure you're also subscribing to the Journey newsletter and now Jeff Nelson's newsletter at jeffnelson.com. Until next time, see you next week. Bye.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to the Journey podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review and head to our Instagram and YouTube to leave a comment. I look forward to hearing how this podcast has made an impact on your own journey.